Hi, my name is David Hawks with Agile Velocity, and today I want to talk to you about a common problem that we see with Scrum teams. The notion is that we do not want our sprints to be a mini waterfall, and we see this a lot of times. So what we see is, let's say we had a team that was made up of 4 developers and 2 testers, 2 QA folks. And let's say we planned a sprint and we pulled 4 user stories into our sprint. So we're doing a 2 week sprint, and over this 2 week sprint, we're trying to get these 4 user stories done. What the common trap that teams fall into is what they do is say, all right, we got user story 1, user story 2, user story 3, user story 4. They say, well, what's the most efficient way for us to task this out and assign this work out? And what happens is they say, well, why don't we assign developer 1 to work on this first story? So developer 1 is going to take that, and developer 2, you take this story, and developer 3, you take this story. Now, let's think about this. So developers, as a past developer, developers kind of like this, because developers don't really like people. Just kidding. But we tend to like to just go off and work and try and knock something out with focus, put our headphones on and go work on our own and get something done. And so what we're going to do is, it is kind of nice for us to be able to say, all right, I'm going to go work on that. They're going to go work on that. I'm not going to get interrupted for 8 days. And then at the end of the 8 days, I'll throw this over the wall to my QA person. And what that probably looks like is like QA1 is going to take these first 2 stories. QA2 is going to take these 2 stories. Now, how do you think this is going to end up at the end of the sprint, right? So all of a sudden, we have gone and QA starts working on this, and they start finding bugs, and then we get to the end, and what do you think the chance is that we might carry over and not get everything what we call done? Will we have all the bugs addressed by the end of the sprint? There's a high likelihood that we will end up carrying over some of this stuff. So if we were looking at a burn down chart for this sprint, what would happen is if we're burning down stories complete, it would be flat until the very end, and maybe we get something signed off, but maybe we have this gap of not everything getting done. And so while this is better than going off and working on something for 3 months, 4 months, the idea here is that we are shrinking it into 2 weeks, which is better, but this isn't really how we want to work. This isn't what we want our teams to do. We don't want to, we want to get teams out of their silos and into more swarming. So the idea here, and in order to swarm, what we have to do is be able to break things down into smaller chunks. So what we might want to do is break down user story 1 into user story 1A, user story 1B, user story 1C, and figure out as a team, how can we task this out into small parts, right, where we could assign developer 1 and 2 to work on that. And how can we get testing involved earlier? Maybe that's looking at more test automation. What can we do to get testing done earlier so that we can get something signed off, early in the sprint, not waiting till the last day, which also means that we might have a swarming with developers 3 and 4 and QA2 on something and trying to get it done. So the question we're challenging our teams with is, what would it take to get something signed off by like day 3 or day 4? And then, we're going to continue to work on smaller things along the way, but we're swarming. We're trying to get as many people to get user story 1 as a whole signed off. How can we do that? And then what happens to our burn down chart over here is we see a little bit better progression throughout our sprint, which is reducing the risk of finding everything late and running out of time. It gives us better predictability throughout our sprint. It also reduces the risk that the highest value item will carry over, and it reduces just the risk of carryover altogether. So that's the challenge that we're trying to push our teams to, is how to get out of a mini waterfall. And so the skills here are, how do we break work down, how do we task, and how do we swarm? So hopefully that will help you try and get your teams more successful with Scrum.